This episode is brought to you by Avalanche, the layer 1 that is blazingly fast, low cost, and eco-friendly. You'll hear more about Avalanche later in the show. Yo, what's going on, everyone? We got Gmoney with us for the Roundup this week. Gmoney, if you guys don't know, A, you're living under a rock, but B, hopefully you guys know Gmoney, one of the kind of leading folks in the NFT space. I remember back, I think it was January 6th, 2021, Gmoney, you posted this thing coming out. It was like, just thinking about, everyone's coming out of the new year, January 2021, and you posted this thing about why you purchased Punk 8219 for 140 ETH. And I was like, man, this guy's crazy. This guy has, this is top signal, toppy. And you called it, man. You absolutely nailed it with that. So excited to have you on the show. We're going to be talking Bored Apes, Punks, the acquisition, ApeCoin, all that fun stuff. So welcome to Empire, my friend.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Let's get right into it. So let's get right into this Ape acquisition. I know we only got you for like 25 minutes. So 2017, LarvaLabs, they create Punks. They own like 100% of the IP. YugaLabs then creates Bored Ape Yacht Club, launched in April 2021. And Punks are like this OG project, the like whale NFT project. And in the past year, the floor price of Bored Ape Yacht Club has actually gone up and flipped Punks. And what we just saw recently is that the owners of Bored Ape Yacht Club, YugaLabs, just actually acquired the rights to Punks and Meebits from LarvaLabs. So we can get into more of like the transaction details and things like that if we want to, but just want to get your high level framework for how you're viewing this deal. And maybe if you want to just share some details on the deal as well, if that's helpful.
Yeah, sure. First off, thanks for having me on. Listen, when the news came out, I was ecstatic, right? I've been trying to get the commercial rights to my Punk for a while now. And, I very much understood that having it as my profile picture and using it as my identity was very much hindering me from pursuing a lot of the things that I wanted to pursue. So when this announcement was made, I was ecstatic, right? As an IP holder of Punks. In a perfect world, would I have preferred that it was owned by the community in a DAO, or that the IP would be separated? The top two IPs in the space be separated? Sure, right? Like that's exactly what I would want in a perfect world. But I also understand that I would rather have Yuga buy the IP and give everybody a commercial license, as opposed to maybe some major conglomerate from the outside come in, like a Disney or something, and tightly hold that IP. So I think that like I would have preferred it to be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, I think this is a win for the Punk community.
Santi, what's your take on this? You're obviously Punk 9159, right? You feel similarly?
Yeah, I agree with Gmoney. Look, I'm glad. So two things. Like obviously, I think it was December where like LarvaLabs said, "Hey, there was a lot of the nouns guy, which is 915. What is it? 9159.
4156.
Yeah, he there was like this stir in the community. Say, what's going on with IP? Like Creative Commons is the way of the future. It's aligned with Web3 ethos. And it was sort of the elephant in the room. And I think that pressure, put LarvaLabs. I don't think LarvaLabs seems equipped to like deal with all this stuff. They're good creators, but this is sort of like a interesting. It was like a thing that they needed to resolve. I would agree with Gmoney. I would have loved this to somehow be this IP be placed in a DAO. I don't know the YugaLabs team that well, to be honest. Although if I read the announcement, it feels to me like they are very appreciative and sensitive to the idea of like, look, we want to do what's right for the community. Although technically, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate. Like, what's stopping them from reselling this IP to, I don't know, Facebook? Like, Gmoney, that's technically possible, right, Gmoney? Like, they still own it, even though they say that they're going to do the right thing and be good stewards of it. But nothing is stopping them from selling this IP.
Right. Yeah. And I think the question becomes is what happens if they do, right? Can that license be revoked at any time after it's been given? I really don't know. Right. That's something I guess we need to hear from IP lawyers. But I think for now, they just raised a ton of money. They're about to raise more money. It seems like through land sales. So I'm not sure that they're necessarily ready to be acquired just yet. But I do agree with you, right? Like you do have that concern of what happens if somebody comes in over the top and buys them or buys the IP from them.
And Gmoney, you brought up something that I want to dig deeper on, which is you wanted to acquire the IP rights to your punk. You've obviously done a lot with your punk. Like you have one of the most, if not the most identifiable punk out there, because you've done collaborations with Adidas. You're putting your name out there a lot, and you and I have talked a lot about like brand IP and using an NFT to accrue value to your brand. And like, what would have been the worst case scenario here? Like, you go out there, you do merch, you do other stuff, and what? Like, LarvaLabs sues you, or like in this case, YugaLabs says, "Hey, cease and desist. You're breaching IP." You get all these messy lawyers involved, and like you have to like step down. Like, I'm curious if you've ever felt. There's always that threat, but I'm curious if you ever felt that they were going to push that boundary and really go clamp down on a breach of IP.
Well, so when I did the collab with Adidas, I went to Larva Labs representation at UTA, and I showed them the Adidas deal, and they were not interested in being part of it. And I heard through the grapevine that they tried cutting me out of it, right? So after that, I was very much like, all right, well, I'm on my own here, right? Like I feel like at the beginning half of last year, I was a huge advocate for the punk community because my thesis was if everybody knows like what the G Money CryptoPunk is, then everybody will know what CryptoPunks are, and then everybody will know what NFTs were, right? Like that was kind of like my top of the funnel type of thesis there, and like it just became clear to me that they because I mean, and it was their right? Like they were the artists, they were the creators, and they had the ability to choose whatever they wanted. So it was like at that point that I was like, all right, well, obviously, I need to move away from the punk, which is why my punk was not on the actual NFT, right? It was a derivative, and then it was a logo that I've been rebranding to, right? That I was rebranding to, and so to me, it's like I could have gone full force against it and like really pushed the issue, but also it's like understanding that it would have been a lot of like wasted time and capital in like trying to make a statement, right? Like I feel like there's like too much opportunity to build cool stuff as like instead of like sitting there trying to get over a back and forth over like what's right and what's wrong, right?
That's great. No, I totally agree with you. Like you talk about derivatives, and there's a project that you and I are involved with called Universe. That look, the backstory of Universe is a group of us said, "Oh, Pepes are great. Like I love Pepes. Let's just go out and do fun stuff with a Pepe derivatives." All of a sudden, we hear from what's his name, Gmoney, the Matt Fury, who's not actually the creator of Pepes. This actually comes from a TV show in Argentina, I believe. Nonetheless, guy, we get a nasty letter from his lawyer, and we backed out. It's like, to your point, G-Money, it's like it's not worth the effort. That experience, a group of us, and pioneered by like Tyler and a few other folks, said, let's actually create a platform and a set of contracts that allows this idea of, okay, you're the original creator, fine. Like a lot of credit to LarvaLabs and all the original creators out there. But there is also this idea that over time, if you think of like this curve, there is a lot of value by fans and other folks like Gmoney that are actually, promoting the brand in a very interesting way. And they deserve some value from that IP. And so that was kind of the idea behind Universe, which is I find fascinating because we talk about a lot about IP. To me, it feels like a very antiquated like concept. I think, we're in this world where we're redefining what IP really means. But to your point, G-Money, I want to get your take on this idea of creating derivatives and value accruing not just to the original creator, but like, people that are promoting and pushing that brand forward. It's a difficult thing to do, but I think at least, these experiences leave us with precedent to say, okay, let's build something different here.
Right. Yeah, no, and I agree. And that was one of the things I ran into, right? Is like about halfway through last year, I realized like, wow, like I'm doing all this work promoting the CryptoPunks brand and IP. and there's no way for me to monetize it, right? It's like, I can monetize it by selling it, but then I'm no longer a part of the community, right? And it's not necessarily that I was sitting there trying to like extract rent or whatever. It's like I felt like I was providing value, and I just wanted a way to kind of like make a living while doing it, right? And that was really what my concern was, right? And I'll be honest, like the Adidas thing, when I first started talking to them, I'm like, holy shit, like it would. Oh, sorry, can I curse on this thing? Sorry about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you
This is
can.
not PG. This is not PG.
All right, and I was like, oh man, like I would love to put like my ape, right, like on Adidas branded gear, right? That was like my first thought, and it sadly like it didn't work out that way, and I just didn't want to go down that route of starting a courtroom battle for just to set precedent against an entity that just made $100 million in the last 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Gmoney, just for listeners to understand, when you say ape, you mean your punk ape?
Yeah, my punk ape. Yeah.
But before we move on to Bored Apes, which interestingly, there's a lot of developments there going on, I want to touch on this idea of a derivative. Like, when digital music got started in this like Napster, post Napster, like there was a lot of discussions and lawyers getting involved around what actually constitutes a breach of IP. And I think there's like certain seconds, like there's certain melodies that people borrow, like that are very popular. And I think there's like a standard where you can only like do like the first 5, 10, or there's some like very, like lawyers know this by heart, which is artists can only copy certain melody for like a certain amount of seconds. Okay, we apply that concept. The standards around like NFTs are pretty much not there. But like when you talk about doing a derivative of your punk, or say my punk, what does that actually mean? Like, are you changing the colors? Are you changing something, the schematics, or something that makes it recognizable but not as recognizable? Like people still know it's your punk, and you're kind of like, is it a workaround, or is it something totally different? I'm curious how you think of derivatives of NFTs.
I mean, to be honest, like I don't really know the exact answer to that. I kind of see it as like maybe my punk reimagined through the creator's eyes, right? So like, what is it that makes my punk so recognizable? It's probably the orange beanie on an ape, right? And so it's like, if somebody were to draw their own version of an ape wearing an orange beanie, that's a derivative in my viewpoint. And it could even be like a yellow beanie, like maybe like a pixelated ape with a yellow beanie and like blue skin, maybe. I don't really know where that line is, and I personally didn't necessarily want to go up and
you don't want to be the guy on the front line just getting chopped if you come too close. Yeah, I hear you.
Exactly. Because it didn't make sense for me, right? Like I said, it was a question of time and money, and it's like, rather than fight and like stand on this hill and die on it, I'd rather like be innovating in the space because there's plenty of room to operate in.
Yeah. So another question, you still have your punk. I still do have my punk. I do share your concerns around IP because I'm like, wait a minute. It's like my Twitter profile. Well, I don't consider myself an influencer. I just built an audience, and I am curious how you think about going forward. Where are you going to spend more of your time? One, do you keep your punks? Or two, do you think that you can take the Gmoney brand, disassociated from this punk with a beanie, and just create your own, and literally create your own PFP and go from there? And just like, I'm curious because I'm sure other creators are thinking about this, right?
So I've thought about this a lot. Now that I have the IP to my punk, I think I am not as likely to do it anymore. But I have a logo now, right? Like I have a brand. I was moving away from it before this, but that was because I didn't want to necessarily go into that battle, right? But I do think that there's multiple brands that can be made. I have a lot of things in the works that aren't necessarily revolved around like just the IP to my punk, right?
And when you say you bought your IP, is this like you personally went to Yuga or during this transaction and you own it, or Yuga?
No, I'm saying like creating like my IP, like for instance, like my if you go on my Twitter banner, on my Twitter profile, my Twitter banner is like the Gmoney logo, right? Which that's what was featured on the Adidas gear, right? Because also, as a large multinational corporation with large pockets, if they put the ape on a sweater, they would have instantly been sued, right? By Larva, right?
You think
Like
so?
I think so, right? Like
Hmm.
they own the IP to it, right? And Adidas has big pockets, right? Isn't that usually like how lawsuits goes? Like if they have a lot of money, sue them. So I feel, as a large multinational, they had a lot of concerns, and they definitely did not want to infringe on any trademarks or copyrights internationally. So because of that, I worked really hard to get my logo and my typeface on, and like kind of my branding the way I wanted it to be, so that I could move away from the punk if needed. So I already had that process happening when it was going down.
Would you at some point give up your punk?
I don't think so. Maybe I would maybe change my profile picture, but I don't think I would. I'm hoping that this is like a family heirloom passed down through generations.
Let me ask both of you guys this actually. I want to try to, maybe this is a stretch analogy, but make an analogy here to Bitcoin and Ethereum. Punks feel like Bitcoin to me, which is punks are made up of this like OG community. They're proud of the fact that like there's this, that they got in early, they're OG. Like owning a punk represents almost that you're an OG in crypto in general, almost like being like a hardcore Bitcoiner in the early days. You're a hardcore Bitcoiner. And then what happens is Ethereum comes around, and Ethereum says, we're going to sacrifice on some things, but we're actually going to add a lot of utility to this project, which enabled you to build things on top of Ethereum. And Bored Ape came along, and Bored Ape did a similar thing, which is they said, look, we want to enable IP for everyone, and we want to actually add kind of utility to this project. And they brought on Guy Osiri, right? Who's it? Madonna's agent, talent agent. I think Ashton Kutcher's talent agent, among a bunch of other folks. And they basically said, we want to build this like a startup and actually build things instead of just treating this as like almost a dead asset that people just own because it's a collectible. And so I want to get your, maybe Gmoney, I'm curious to get your take on almost that analogy, comparing Bitcoin to the punks and ETH to the Bored Ape Yacht Club. And just curious what you think of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good analogy, right? I think one of the reasons why apes were able to, or Bored Apes were able to start memeing and got a good community around it, right? Is that I think, especially around that time, I believe it was May was when they were minting, was there were a lot of punks in the community that were kind of like, not knowing what they wanted to do with their IP because they weren't sure, right? Like when I bought my ape, I wanted to put it on a t-shirt and sell t-shirts like literally right away. But as I like learned about the license, I was like, all right, well, I really can't do that. I can do that, up to $100,000, but like there's no real scale in it, right? And it's like if crypto is a game of scale and making things automated, it wouldn't be the best use of my time. And I think there were a lot of punks that were in that situation in May where people like, there's Spotty, who's the CryptoPunk rapper, right? And like, he still uses his punk, but like, we were all kind of like held back a little bit. So I think when apes really started hitting the scene and people made them their profile pictures, and then you had all these like derivative projects like Jenkins the Valet, people kind of creating their identities around it, putting it on Arizona iced tea, on microbrews and all this stuff, you just started seeing like the community kind of meme Bored Apes. And then it started organically. And then I think when you throw Hollywood on top of there and Guy's done a great job with the community, it's just like really throwing gasoline on the fire, right? And you kind of see what's happened, right? Like I think if you take a look at the general population, they're more likely to know what a Bored Ape is than CryptoPunk.
Yeah. Gee, I want to get your take on this DC Investor quote. So DC Investor tweeted out, most NFT startups are going to either A, die out, B, get acquired by a megacorp, or C, get acquired by a crypto native firm who then gets acquired by a megacorp. And I think it was also DC Investor who compared it to like NFT IP acquisitions and consolidations to microbreweries, right? Where he said people love microbreweries because they allow for this interesting lore and a story and seasonal flavors. But then the real success of a microbrewery comes when they sell out to a megacorp like a Budweiser. What does this mean for the future of M&A within the NFT space?
Yeah, I mean, I think it throws it on the table, right? Like I think YugaLabs still has a huge war chest. I assume they're in talks with other projects, right? Like everyone started joking right after this acquisition is like, buy my, insert dead project here, right? Like that's what people were joking. I think it's a possibility, and I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with it, right? Like, the only reason we're all talking about NFTs today is because number went up really quickly, really fast, right? If the number didn't go up as quickly, and there's good things and bad things to that, right? Like the good things is that it is introducing crypto culture to the world at large in a scale that we haven't seen before in the past, right? But then also the negative is that a lot of it becomes about the financialization of every product, right? But like I also will say that, like, make no mistake about it, every industry has a financialization of their product, whether they care to admit it or not, right? This is just the most transparent way to go about it. So, I mean, I think that this is just like capitalism, right? Like, somebody makes something, somebody thinks that there's value in there, and they think that they can add more value, they're going to acquire it, right? Like, I'm hoping that we don't have just one conglomerate. Somebody brought up the fact that, if this was publicly traded and, under the control of the SEC, would there be some antitrust restrictions? And like, I'm not sure I agree with that, because Disney could come into the space tomorrow, and they're, Disney, DreamWorks, like, you have a lot of these different, Universal, all these different companies that can come in with massive IP tomorrow that would be the number one player in the space. So, I also think it's probably Yuga maybe playing a little defense too, because if they own the best IP in the space, when Disney comes into the space, they don't come in and just totally own the space, right?
Let's talk about Disney coming in and just what's next actually for Yuga. So Yuga now owns, trying to actually think of everything that they own right now. You've got Meebits, you've got Bored Apes, you've got Punks. So anyways, they now have a couple of the top grossing projects, right? And they definitely have number one and number two. Today, they're launching, I think actually currently as we're talking right now, you've got the ApeCoin airdrop going on. And ApeCoin is the big talk of the town right now. And I'm sure this episode will go live tomorrow morning. So I'm sure we'll have a lot more info there. But what do you see as the future for YugaLabs? They now have over, I think it's 50,000 NFTs in their collection. Is YugaLabs going to take on someone like Disney?
I mean, I have no idea. If I were to guess just from the artwork, I don't think the same consumer that consumes Disney products or, Disney movies will be consuming Bored Ape products, right? Like, I think it's a very different target. For instance, I was at South by Southwest earlier this week, and I was in the Doodles exhibit, and that felt like being in Disney. I was like, this feels like Web3 Disney, right? Like, right. It really felt like a family oriented experience. I'm not sure Yuga is really going. Maybe they acquire Doodles or something like Doodles, right? And that would be like the Disney vertical for them. But like, I really don't know. Your guess is really as good as mine. I don't really talk to the team that much, other than really our collaboration on the Adidas side. But I assume they raised a ton of money for something, right? And I don't think they're done. I think they've had great execution in the space so far, and I think you got to give them credit for that.
Yeah. Gee, I know you got to jump in 2 minutes. I think last question here is just get your take on the NFT space in general. As we've seen the market fall for a lot of other things in crypto, whether it's DeFi tokens are down like 90%, some of the metaverse things are down like 60, 70%. A lot of assets in the industry are down, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90%. You've seen NFT projects, the good ones, the blue chips like Doodles and Apes and, Punks has taken a step back obviously, but still doing incredibly well relative to a lot of other assets. What's your like mental model for how you see the NFT space moving forward over the next like 9 months this year?
Well, I think a lot of it is tied to macro, right? Like, so I think when you say, how much all these projects are down within their own confine, it sounds like a lot. But then when you take a look at, Facebook is down 50% from highs, like tech stocks are getting crushed, right? On the NASDAQ. And I think when you put it in that context, right, it's like at this point right now, it's all related to macro and where interest rates are headed. And, obviously the Fed raised rates yesterday, right? And they seem to be pretty committed to fighting inflation, which is obviously, I think, a negative for all risk assets worldwide. But I'll be honest, as I was watching the price reaction of Bitcoin and Ethereum and crypto in general, and I mean equities in general, right? Like yesterday, it had a really positive reaction to the statement. And maybe people are thinking we stop raising rates sooner rather than later. And if that's the case, then like it's kind of like game on, right? But the question is like, how far is that drawdown? So, I mean, I think when you look at NFTs, it's a cultural phenomenon. And I think, will there be more NFT usage 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? I think the answer to that is yes. And because of that, I wanna be in the space, in the best projects, like the blue chips, the ones that I think have the most reflexivity to the upside in a market that I think is in its infancy still.
Yeah. Any projects that you really love right now?
I mean, besides CryptoPunks, I'm always a huge fan of Chromie Squiggles. I think Snowfro is amazing. I think you guys should probably try to get him on here. Like every time I hear him talk, he's just so passionate and he's really dedicated to the true ethos of crypto, and it's really amazing to hear him talk. So I love Squiggles for that reason. I think Cyber Brokers is a recent mint that came out about like 2 weeks ago, I think. And that's by Josie Bellini, who's an OG crypto artist.
Oh, Josie. Yeah, I love Josie.
Yeah. And she's like, she's kind of like because of her, I got red pilled into crypto, right? So her husband is Andrew Steinwald, who helped red pill me, into NFTs, who helped red pill me into NFTs. And she red pilled him. So it's, she's been here since the start. So I really look forward to the stuff that she's working on. But yeah, I mean, I think in a market like this, where asset prices are pulling back, you just have to be a little more discerning with what you're going to be buying, right? And not expect to buy something and have it like 10x up right away.
Well, Gmoney, you're the man. Thanks for coming on. Congrats on also the Brick Breaker launch. Saw that it sold out in pre-mint, and just a really cool, like it looks like the entire game is fully on chain. So that looks really cool. And yeah, man, wishing you the best with everything.
All right. Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, G.
Thanks, Santi. Thanks, guys. See you guys later.
See ya.
Bye.
All right, friends, quick break to share some exciting DeFi updates from Avalanche, which is one of the fastest and the most eco-friendly smart contract platforms out there. If you haven't been keeping up with the DeFi innovation on Avalanche, it is madness. There are new DeFi protocols launching on Avalanche on a daily basis. The ecosystem is getting pretty incredible. I thought I'd call out like 3 different projects that I'm keeping an eye on right now. The Platypus Wars are heating up on the new stable swap protocol. Dexalot is launching soon. They've got this unique price discovery mechanism and an on-chain limit order book. I think that's pretty interesting. And then also Trader Joe just launched a brand new set of tokenomics to participate in token launches, stablecoin farming, and governance tokens. Really, really interesting innovation coming out of the DeFi space on Avalanche. And then also just beyond DeFi innovation, there's a study I thought you guys might find interesting. The Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute assessed the carbon efficiency of 6 of the leading networks. They found that Avalanche consumes 35,000 times less energy than Ethereum and 200,000 times less than Bitcoin. Obviously, go do your own research. There's this study from the Crypto Carbon Ratings Institute that is CCRI. You can go read it on your own. But if you guys want to build DeFi products, if you want to use DeFi and want to do it in an eco-friendly way, do it on Avalanche. Now, let's get back to the show.
The man himself. I love G. G red pilled me into punks. Like I'd been a part of it, like didn't think much of it like 2017. And then really him and I just got into talk. I actually tried to hire him when I was at Verify to really start an NFT fund. And then in this discussions, it just become really close with him. And he was like, buy punk. And, he was like, buy punk and then put it as a profile picture and to elevate the profile of punks. And so I think like really sympathize with what he said, which is I do genuinely believe that there have been few individuals, him probably front and center, and others that have really pushed the punk brand forward and make it probably the obviously Bored Apes is done what it has. But before that, it really put NFTs and punks at the center of all of that. And hearing him talk now, and I candidly had just been too busy to think about like IP and all this stuff. Obviously been watching all the Creative Commons discussions, but seeing YugaLabs and seeing what Bored Apes has done is nothing short of impressive. This is a prediction that I got wrong terribly at the end of last year, that I would say that punks would continue to the price of Bored Apes was not going to flip punks. Well, it had flipped then, and I said, punks are probably going to surpass it and just preserve their status as the premier NFT. And so a lot of it is put into question. Like, I still believe in punks. I still, I still love them aesthetically. For me, that's the number one criteria by which I collect. But it does candidly put into question, like, hey, like, how do I think about my IP, and how do I think about, my punk, and which obviously is nowhere near recognizable to what Gmoney did. But I have, to be fair, wanted to do in the past certain things with my punk. And I, knowing that I don't have the IP has been a deterrent for me to actually do that.
Yeah. Here's my, I've spoken to a lot of punk holders since this happened about just to try to get their take in like preparation for this episode. A lot of punk holders say the same thing, which is kind of what you said and what Gmoney says, which is, I'm really excited. Now I can use the IP and it's going to be really great. And YugaLabs are stewards of this IP and of this project. And they built this, big brand, like they're building a company and they're raising from Andreessen Horowitz and all that fun stuff. Reading between the lines though, hearing how you're talking about it and hearing how Gmoney talks about it, I think there's a sense of, damn, did we just lose the OG-ness and the indie culture almost of the punk brand, which is what made it so special, I
don't think so.
You don't think so?
No, like
you are 100. I'm trying to probe a little bit here, but you're 100% excited about this, and you think that this is.
I'm not like. I think YugaLabs is a good steward. I've spoken to those guys. I think they get it. I'm not like as worried about this IP stuff. Like, again, this is why I asked Gmoney, like, what is a derivative? Like, do you think that they would actually like clamp down on IP infringement, if you will, which I think is such a stupid concept. Look, I love creators. I very much believe that they should be compensated, which has not been the case in Web 2. So I'm approaching it like I'm inverting it. I think this whole IP discussion is born out of, creators have been shafted in Web 2 land. Like, you talk about how much money they make, influencers. Like, this is why influencers suck. Because they go through a phase where initially it's pure, pristine, genuine, authentic content. And as soon as you hit 100,000 followers, as soon as you hit 1 million followers on Instagram, it tampers with the authenticity in the same way that you were probably talking about, like craft and microbreweries. Yeah, it does change and it sucks. And you know why? Because I think when you're faced with an alternative, like, humans will always do what's in their best interest. And, that you can make decent money, a lot of money sometimes being an influencer. But the reality is, like, there is a better way to like actually monetize your brand and monetize your creative process, whatever that may be, in a more equitable way. And what I'm trying to say is, in Web 2, if you look at how much YouTube pays creators and Spotify pays musicians, it's actually like terrible. And in Web 3, I think you see a path forward where I know it might be difficult for a creator coming from Web 2 that's been scarred to say, I want to share my IP and make a Creative Commons for people to come and build. And they might not see the path, which is you're going to make way more money if you actually do it Creative Commons and you do the right thing. It's hard to understand, and it's this idea of growing the pie. And this is what YugaLabs said in their statement, which is, obviously a lot of people were worried about, wait a minute, they own punks. They own now punks and Bored Apes. Like, how are they going to split their time? Can they just, and they said, listen, it is a win-win mentality. Like, let's grow the pie. It's not about one versus the other. It's so small. NFTs are so small. And I think, like, I believe that. From when they say that, I believe it. Obviously, the risk is always there that they might sell the IP to someone else. But, I'm very much hopeful that this sets a good precedent to creators out there to go the path of avoid all this stuff and go Creative Commons. Because Bored Apes has shown you how powerful that can be. Like, in 6-7 months, I mean, no one would have imagined they would have done this. And where they are now and capturing the attention of so many people. And what they've done for the space is incredible. So, you know what I mean? I hope that the key point I'm trying to make here is I do sympathize with creators that want to be super protective of their IP, because in Web 2, you'd have to. it's terrible. You don't get much upside and much equity distribution in the value you're creating. In Web3, I think we're seeing early indications of how powerful open source and Creative Commons can be. People just build and hash and create derivatives of your work. And so, that I think is a way forward, because IP in Web3 is just much more interesting than in Web2.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. This sets the precedent for how PFP projects should be structured rights-wise, right? There used to be, a lot of projects, it was like non-commercial licenses for personal use and limited license for non-digital use. Not going to make it moving forward if that's your stance. I think when you think about, Gmoney was talking about like the T-shirts. I think that's actually an antiquated way of thinking about it. I don't think the value of like commercial or Creative Commons rights is about making a T-shirt in a physical sense. I think the value of these rights is that you can now build these NFTs into a digitally native environment, right? And you look at what Bored Ape Yacht Club, we'll talk about the ApeCoin and what they're doing in a second, but they're building this they're going to build a digital world, right, where apes are at the center of it. And that's what gets really exciting is when it's not the collab on a T-shirt or anything like that. It's how do you integrate these things into a digitally native world, and that's where it gets really exciting, I think.
Absolutely.
ApeCoin.
Yeah.
You've been following this?
I have, yeah.
All right. Did you get an airdrop? You aping in? What's the update here? 9:40 a.m. Let me pull up the update on what's going on because it's real time. Go ahead. Have you been following this? What are your thoughts on ApeCoin right out of the
What's
gate?
the fully diluted value now? Let's see.
7 billion.
7 billion or so, yeah. Is it really? Total supply, I'm seeing 1 billion. Well, actually, no. Was that 1 trillion? And the price is 0.00. Yeah, no. Is it 3 billion? I'm seeing 3 billion. Where are you seeing 7 billion?
I mean, the total supply is 1 billion. The price right now is 668. So 1 billion. So fully diluted value, 7 billion. Anyway,
7 billion,
massive fully diluted value right out of the gate. Basically, ApeCoin, Bored Ape, YugaLabs came out and said, okay, they came out yesterday. They said, okay, we're introducing ApeCoin, $APE, Ape, a token for culture, gaming, and commerce used to empower a decentralized community building at the forefront of Web3. Damn, that's a lot of buzzwords. ApeCoin is owned and operated by the ApeCoin DAO, a decentralized org where each token holder gets to vote on governance and use of the ecosystem fund. Holding ApeCoin is the only requirement for membership in the ApeCoin DAO. What are they doing here? 62% of the total supply of ApeCoin is allocated to the community, of which 15% of that is available to claim starting today, right now. When you're listening, it'll be yesterday at 8:30 a.m. What are your thoughts on this? NFT project, launching a DAO, launching a
not surprising, because I've been talking about how powerful. When I spoke with these guys, I said it is super interesting. They are inverting the way you go to market. As opposed to launching a token first, you launch an NFT project, builds a ton of community, and then this is a logical sequence to capitalizing on that attention. And so, what's stopping them from just building the most successful L1 and the most successful DeFi protocol and game and metaverse? Nothing, right? Because they have all the attention, right? And they've retained it in a very interesting way from people that are crypto native and non-crypto native. And so, I think this is a logical step for retention and bringing more utility to the NFT. And so it's fascinating. I'm not surprised. I'm happy for their success. I'm not going to comment on whether I believe it's worth 7 billion or 10 billion. So none of this is, again, legal, financial, or any advice. So you do your thing, but, it's pretty impressive that in many ways, if you look at a traditional balance sheet, right, there's this idea of goodwill that is this IP generation and value that is super fluffy. It's essentially you back into it as in an acquisition, for instance, if you were to buy a up and coming brand and it's just the plug to the difference to balance out the balance sheet. And so in this case, you're crystallizing very clearly on that goodwill and the value of the community. So you could argue, you could have looked at it as okay, how much volume is there on a day-to-day? What's the aggregate value of all punks out there given the floor? But it's kind of hard to okay, you could do that analysis and say, okay, the aggregate value of Bored Apes is X based on last sale and or the floor as a benchmark. And then, but this is just a very clear way of just another way to express how to value these communities. The question that I want to ask you is, do you think that this detracts from the pristine and quality of the pure NFT projects And do other projects now go and try to do the same?
All other projects are going to try to do the same. They're going to launch a DAO and they're going to launch, they're going to launch tokens. Here's the most important thing about the ApeCoin and what YugaLabs is doing. They are writing the playbook for how to build in Web3 versus Web2. So in Web2, you build a product, then you raise venture capital, you dilute to raise VC, then you pour that money into Facebook and Instagram ads to acquire customers. That's the Web2 model, and it works. It's the playbook. Web3 flips that on its head, where you say you dilute at the very, very beginning to your community. You build the community first. The community tells you what they want, and then you build products based on what they want. And that's what the most successful Web3 brands are doing right now. Is you build the community first. You build a diehard base of folks, and then you build products for your community. And I love seeing what YugaLabs is doing with ApeCoin.
They are donating 6.25% of their allocation, which is 10 million ApeCoins to Jane Goodall Institute in the initiative.
Oh, that's awesome.
Protecting chimpanzees, the natural world. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
I actually don't know we should probably pull this up and link it in the show notes, but how much did YugaLabs actually retain out of the total token supply? But nonetheless, I mean, I think they're giving more value to their community in a new way and creating more value. So it's pretty positive.
Yeah. By the way, I just want to say I have no idea what's going to happen with this token. No one in the world has any idea. While I love what's going on with Yuga and what they're doing with launching the coin for the launching this token and going to build games and all this and an ecosystem around this, I actually don't think the ApeCoin is a good buy. And just based on, I've participated in a lot of airdrops, right? And when you look at airdrops in the past, you've got like SOS and like Looks and ENS airdrop, obviously. Most of them follow the same pattern. You've got this like, the first few days, there's a lot of buying momentum as everyone's really excited. And then you see the sell-off, and then there's a rebound, and then the project kind of just fades. Not the project. Project remains good, but the token price kind of fades over time. It's like boom, down, up, and then just down fades for a while. And I don't think that a lot of people are saying this one's going to be different because the Bored Ape Yacht Club like holders are, apes are like the holy grail of NFTs. But I don't think that this will be much different because I don't think the psychologically Bored Ape holders like care about the token as much, if you know what I'm saying. I don't think that anyone wants to sell their ape right now, but I think that they're totally fine getting this airdrop and selling the token because they're emotionally attached to their Bored Ape. But I don't think they have that emotional attachment to a token. So that's why I love what is going on with Yuga, but don't maybe love the ApeCoin as a speculative buy.
Yeah. Again, I'm not endorsing it. Much like you. So this is distribution. 62% of all token supply is going to the ecosystem fund. So the community will decide through governance what to do with that. YugaLabs plus charity retains 16%. 14% is going to go to launch contributors, which include the companies and people that help make this project a reality. Probably, I have no idea who these people are. And 8% are going to Bored Ape founders. The initial, so again, 16% is going to YugaLabs. If you look at traditional venture, when a company IPOs, the team owns roughly 20% or so. Yeah. So it's fairly kind of in line. And consistent, in other projects that I've been a part of, the team takes, the company probably takes anywhere from 20 to 30%. There's a board, which is composed of Alexis Ohanian from founder of Reddit, Amy Wu, who used to be at Lightspeed, now at FTX, Maria Bajwa from Sound Ventures. This is Guy Osiri and Ashton Kutcher's fund. Yat Siu from Animoca, which were, been active in the space, and Dean Steinbeck from Horizon Labs. So
it's a good squad. Good squad.
Yeah, I know a few here. Okay.
It's very Web 2 squad, I'd say.
Yeah, I could definitely see a lot of criticism around, where is a steward representative?
That's been the Bored Ape kind of mentality, is a little more Web 2, and we're just building a big brand here, and one of the most important things when I was thinking when Bored Ape flipped Punks, when the floor flipped is, damn, the Lindy of Punks maybe is not as strong as I originally thought it was, and maybe just it's more about distribution and maybe more about brand building, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, and just to clarify one point, so if you have an ape today, you can go and claim, and 15%. So it's coming out of the ecosystem fund. So 15% of the 62%. So actually 15% of all tokens, which is coming from the ecosystem fund, which is 62% of all tokens, is immediately unlocked to claim kind of at launch if you have an ape. So, we'll see obviously a lot of discussions and groups that I'm a part of are tracking, okay, what are people actually doing with these tokens? Are going to dump them or not, or hold them? As always, I've always felt, airdrops can be pretty tricky because there's a lot of noise and MEV going on. People are, supplying them in LP pools and all this. So it's important to be cautious. Coinbase, I think, listed it almost kind of immediately. It's probably had a ton of volume, but still, is this going to do like, a lot, there's probably going to be interesting sell pressure. And I think the things to track are what are actually people doing with these tokens and what are they doing with their ape once they claim the token.
Yeah, exactly. All right, real quick, because I forgot to share this in the beginning and my marketing team's going to get really mad at me. Permissionless, before we move on to some other topics. Do Kwon, just added Do Kwon as a speaker, so pretty pumped on Do Kwon. Chris Dixon also joining us as a speaker. And then on the, and we're also launching our NFTs in 2 weeks. So that should be really, really exciting. You should see these. We partnered up with this guy, 3D Print Guy. They are gorgeous. They're honestly the coolest NFTs I've ever seen, but now I'm just pumping my bag. So permissionless, really excited about that. And then also on the podcast, Santi, I think Zero X Maki decently well. He just messaged me. He's coming on the podcast. So we'll keep an eye out for that. Subscribe to the podcast to just hear about what Zero X Maki and Primordial, I think is his name, are working on at Layer Zero. All right, couple things that I'm paying attention to outside of Bored Apes. Santi, feel free to weigh in on any of these. I'm not sure if you have thoughts on them. We've been talking about Anchor a little bit on the show. Brought on Byron last week, which a lot of love, a lot of hate for Byron, but hopefully a lot of love because Byron's brilliant. There's a proposal by Arca and Polychain that we talked about last week to reduce the Anchor payout dependent on the deposit amount. The vote ended on, I think, a day ago or 2 days ago, and it was not approved. 70% of folks voted, 16% said yes, 54% said no. And I'm assuming that a large percentage of the community was swayed no, because two big players that came out against the proposal were Delphi Digital and Jump. And obviously those two folks carry some weight. The reasons that they didn't like it, A, it's like overly complex. B, the proposal lacked like an implementation strategy with what should we do with the code and the audit and the mechanism details. I think some folks said it opened Anchor up to Sybil attacks, and then it breaks the composability of AUST, which folks were worried that this would slow the adoption of UST, which is required for Anchor to be sustainable. So that's an interesting update there. Other things, a lot of proposals going on with Maker. Tokenomics are still just a big trend right now and a big narrative. I think we'll end up bringing a couple folks on the show to get a little deeper into tokenomics. Maker is now looking to revamp its economics to increase participation with this. I think they're going to roll out, or proposal to roll out different like participation incentives. B, to increase value accrual, and then C, to increase governance security. So that's an interesting proposal to pay attention to. I think the economics were inspired by like X Sushi, STK, Aave, and Cosmos governance, a combination of those three. So that's something interesting to pay attention to. And then there's also a Maker proposal by Hasu, which is, I think it's something I need to look into it more, but I'm just going to shout it out here, something to pay attention to and to go look up. And we can put a link to the proposal in the show notes. But right now, Maker has this flat organizational structure. And I think Hasu's proposal is about how that's kind of hitting its scaling limits. And you need a better incentive system to attract top talent and build long-term strategies. And to do this, you need, I think, what he calls super delegates, who are these domain experts to be chosen. And the goal is to keep the Makers working groups, the CUs, and their incentives aligned with maker holders, but to just have a little more leadership, I would say there.
Yeah. Can't tell how many times I talked to maker team, and I think they, a lot of folks internally have felt like we should create like maker governance is like dormant, and it's a complicated protocol to understand. And VCs a hold a coin. Very few. Of course, we had Ben on from Parify. Parify is probably the most active fund on the maker ecosystem. My former partner Ben loves, breathes maker all the time. It's a backbone of DeFi in many ways, and it's just been a shame that like it is hard to like get a lot of discussion for such an important protocol. And I think this part of Hauser's intuition here, I think is right, and I agree with, which is how do we empower certain delegates within like Monet Supply and a few other folks out there that just do a ton of work, and those guys should actually have more voting power, should have more autonomy to push the protocol forward. It has felt at times that Maker, as important as it is, has been a little bit slow. Now the question, of course, is does a protocol like Maker need to like move fast? Probably not, because if it breaks, like all hell breaks loose. So like you need to be cautious around the type of proposals and the assets that are added as collateral. Like I understand that. And the same with like the central bank. Like you don't see Jay Powell like talk about, he's very guarded. He's very precise, oftentimes cryptic in what he says. And people are like dissecting every single word and intonation. It's a whole art of trying to decipher what he means. But I think there's a reason why central bankers are much more guarded and measured than perhaps a Jamie Dimon or, I think there's a time and a place. Maker, I've always felt, is sort of the central bank of DeFi. And so you need to be more measured in your approach and not as experimental. But still, that's not to say that you can have the more active participants in the Maker community, because there are some, and just give more autonomy. I think that will be very much positive. And that's how I'm reading Haas's proposal, to be fair.
Yeah. My read on this is... Oh my God, what a concept. Create subdivisions and then have leaders run them. Sounds like a VP of marketing and a VP of engineering.
Sounds like organizational theory 101, apply to crypto, which...
I'm just going to call this out that I feel very strongly that people are getting... I continue to say this, so I'm probably beating a drum at this point, but people think that DAOs are all about flat hierarchy. That is not what DAOs are about. DAOs,
will never
flat
work.
Hierarchy. Yeah, when you scale, does not work. The hierarchy of companies is going to look very similar to how it's always looked, which is you have an executive team and then you have leaders who manage other leaders who manage other leaders who manage a team. And that's how companies have been built. And it's not a big problem, I would say.
I think the key component to DAOs and the novelty, I think, is the transparency of how things are, like the transparency in the operations. And I think that places more of checks and balances and a level of accountability to decision makers and people that are processing information. And that's it. That's it. I've always felt that crypto is just that. Just take whatever exists in Web 2. Yeah. Don't try to necessarily reinvent the rocket of like equity, like vesting contracts and all this jazz. Honestly, these things work. They're tried. They're true. Like there's a reason why people shouldn't unlock all day one after 12 months. Like... But here we are. We like to learn the hard way sometimes in crypto.
I will agree with you, but I was looking at the Maker docs over the weekend, some of the governance proposals and what's going on at Maker right now, and they had a team offsite. I think the Maker growth team had a team offsite, and community members were mad at them for spending money to go to the beach. And I was like, oh my God, this sounds like
Well, I'm not saying. Notice I didn't say radical transparency. Like this is the Bridgewater Ray Dalio kind of construct, which is very difficult. Like most people in Bridgewater say this is too much for me to handle. Like I think humans, radical transparency, I'm not advocating for it. It's an interesting concept, but no. I mean like give people the autonomy, especially the people that are the nodes that are closest to the information, to process this information and give them some ring fence their autonomy and have a process for them to take decisions. But yeah, I'm not like suggesting that communities can be really difficult and tribal minorities can like be very vocal. Like, do they need to know that you went on an offsite to Arizona and you spent like $4 in a kombucha? Like, fuck no. Because there's always going to be a guy that's like, who's spending $4 in a kombucha? I'm like, who are you to tell me that I can't spend on that? Because you know what? This makes me more efficient. So fuck off. Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes communities can be like that. And I appreciate that. There's a time and a place, you know, but still more transparency and accountability, not full transparency. Some privacy is important.
Next thing I'm paying attention to is the Juno whale. Juno is a layer 1 smart contract, I think Cosmos protocol. There was this Juno airdrop that was intended to have a whale cap that limited the airdrop per entity to 50,000, but the Juno docs stated 50,000 per address. So obviously what some savvy folks came in and did is scooped up a whole bunch of I think there's this Atom whale that had multiple Atom addresses with like 100,000 Atom staked. He or she received 2.5 million Juno in total. And I think actually yesterday, the Juno DAO voted to cut the balance of Juno tokens held by this large holder, the whale. So that's like the community coming together to reduce the token allocation because this whale kind of exploited a loophole. It wasn't even a flaw in the smart contract or anything. It's just a loophole in how they wrote it. And yeah, it's interesting to see a community come together to kind of reverse this decision. I would say it's interesting. It kind of sets a potentially dangerous precedent, but I think they wiped out like 122 million of their funds. So I'd be pretty pissed if I was that whale. Last thing is just actually a couple more things. I'm going to run through quickly because I know you got a flight to catch. Aave V3, shout out to Stani and the whole team at Aave. Just kick-ass work. Aave continues to innovate both on the core product, but also on other things like their social media protocol.
It's probably the DeFi protocol that is shipping and has the most ambitious vision and shipping cool stuff. So shout out to Stani and the team.
I know you're good friends with Stani. Their team messaged us yesterday. He's going to come on the show. So we'll talk about all the Aave updates. Dig in there. Other thing is going back to Anchor for a second. Anchor launched something. I got sent this right before the podcast. Anchor has taken its first step to go interchain, powered by Wormhole Crypto. There's X Anchor, which is now bringing Anchor's functionality to non-Terra blockchains, starting with Avalanche first. Really interesting. I think this like seamless cross-chain UX, I don't know if you've played around yet, but pretty seamless cross-chain UX is something that users care the most about. And Terra's figured out a way, Anchor's figured out a way to do that. So Santi, anything else you're paying attention to?
No, obviously we didn't talk much about macro. We're not experts here on it. Interesting though that, 25 bips hike. We talked about it earlier in the episode. I thought it was interesting. It's always a good reminder to see how markets react because you always ought to wonder how much of it is priced in. We'll see. I'm not calling the return of the bull. I think it's important. These are interesting times in the world, very uncertain, and so. But it's good to see the reaction, and at the end of the day, really cool stuff. To be fair, like. From my vantage point, I get to talk to so many teams, and I'm very active as an angel. I can't tell you the talent that I keep seeing in the space. Like my pace of deployment has not stopped. And there was a time 2 months ago that I felt like the quality of the teams wasn't there. But now I'm seeing just a resurgence of like super talented teams from Web 2. And as long as that continues, I think that's the most important thing. And I'm not going to change my tune. I think this is the space where I think about, you want to always be investing in innovation and growth long term. That's I think what gets us out of trouble, and outperforming certainly stuff like inflation. So, I think like for me, that's super encouraging. And everything we talked about in this episode is pretty interesting stuff. Like I think we'll look back in 5-10 years and say, okay, this was a new precedent for how to think about IP. For in the Web3 context of digital property rights that are so important. And history is kind of being written this week. And so very encouraging, very interesting. We'll see how this ApeCoin, I think you called it, Yano. This ApeCoin, I think, we'll see. Prediction for next week. How many NFT projects do you, okay, in the next month, let's end with this. In the next month, how many more ApeCoin types will we see from other NFT projects, Doodles and others out there?
I would say under 5 in the short term. Like your timeline is quite short here, but I think every NFT project is going to try to launch a DAO and a governance token, and most will not succeed.
Okay. I like
Yeah.
it. I like it.
Yeah. I think that what people don't realize is that Andreessen Horowitz is involved with YugaLabs. Andreessen is rapidly building up their regulatory team. There's a reason YugaLabs asked for everyone's social security number. It's because this thing's going to be issued as a compliant security. Other folks are not going to take the time to do that. It requires a massive legal spend for proper compliance that most people can't afford. And that's just the regulatory system that we live in today. So that's why people are going to try to do it. But that's why I'm assuming most should not actually do it.
Mm-hmm. Sir, as always, good to be back. Thank you. Permissionless coming up. I am excited to get, to be out there.
We've got, it's Friday today. We've got an episode coming out on Monday with Gabby from YGG and Felix Sim. Best episode we have ever recorded on gaming guilds. I'm really excited about that one. If you guys have feedback on the episode, jump in the Discord. Santi is now in the Discord. Join the Blockworks Discord. Jump in the Empire channel. And then if you guys want to hear the episode on Monday, just if you're listening on Apple, subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, subscribe and give us a review. Gotta pump those numbers, baby. So anyways, happy Friday. Hope you guys all enjoy the weekend. Santi, my man, safe travels, and we will talk soon.
Thanks, my man. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for listening.